Hey everyone, there's a very interesting game played between Magnus Carlsen and Wesley in the Sinquefield Cup a few days ago. Now in this game the position becomes rather blocked, but it gets very interesting due to some Zugzwang ideas. And this is where a player can't move a piece without weakening their position. So in this game Magnus Carlsen plays white, Wesley is playing black. The game starts with 1e4, So plays e5, and Knight f3 is played, Knight c6, Bishop c4 and Bishop c5. Magnus castles in this position, Knight f6 is played, and white plays d3 sporting the e4 pawn. Black castles as well, and white plays c3. Wesley played d6, trying to develop the bishop, and white plays h3 stopping the bishop, jumping into g4, and black plays h6 as well, stopping the bishop, jumping into g5. White plays rook e1, a6 is played, maybe preparing it a b5 at any moment. But now Carlsen swiftly stops this with a4, and this must be theory because now the best move for black is to actually play a5, which is what So played. And it looks as though this a5 idea may be met with knight to a7, maybe c6 and b5 ideas, followed by bishop to e6. In the game, Carlsen played knight bd2, developing another piece. So now So hits white straight away with bishop to e6, hitting the bishop. So white's got a decision to make in this position. They can either move the bishop backwards or move it to b5 or capture this bishop on e6. Bishop takes e6 has been tried in other games. After f takes e6, maybe white could play queen to b3, hitting two pawns at the same time. So it looks as though white may have won a pawn. But actually after queen to e8 to protect this e6 pawn, white can never play queen takes b7 here, because after bishop b6, the queen is now trapped in the corner and black is significantly winning this game now. For instance, the next move, black can just play rook to a7 and win white's queen. So after queen e8, white may be forced just to play a normal move like knight to f1, and the game continues equally in a very even position. So after bishop to e6, Magnus now plays bishop to b5, preparing bishop takes c6, trying to double black's pawns, but So's having none of that. He plays knight to a7, attacking the bishop on b5. But as a consequence of the knight moving from c6, the d4 square is now significantly weakened, and Carlsen now plays d4, hitting the bishop on c5. In the game, black took the bishop on b5. Black could also take the pawn on d4, e takes d4, and after c takes d4 it may transpose after knight takes b5. White could play d takes c5 here, and black can move the knight back to a7, but after maybe c takes d6, c takes d6, it's very hard to see who's winning, but after a move like knight d4 it looks as though white has an edge here. Obviously the material is equal, but white seems to have more active piece play. But after d4, black didn't play e takes d4, So actually played knight takes b5, so taking the bishop off, and Magnus takes on c5 with the pawn. A takes b5 again was an option, but black may play e takes d4, and if c takes d4 here, this is bad for white due to bishop to b4, pinning this knight on d2. And this bishop on b4 is now never going to be able to get shifted because there's no a3 move. So after e takes d4, white may be forced to take with the knight. After bishop takes c takes, again the position is really equal, but black's got a very nice position now. The pawn on b5 and b2 are rather weak for white, and white has more pawn islands, so you expect black to do well in this position. So for this reason, Magnus decided to take the bishop off on c5. The knight is still under attack, so knight to a7 is played. And Carlsen plays a really clever move here. He plays b3. And the point of this move is to potentially play a bishop to a3. And black can't play d takes c5 here due to knight takes e5. So after b3, white's in no rush to capture on d6 with the c5 pawn. And black's forced to play a move like rook to e8 is what So played in the game, reinforcing e5 and moving the rook off the dark square diagonal. And now Magnus takes on d6, queen takes d6 is played, and bishop to a3. So the bishop's hitting the queen. c5 is played by So to blunt this bishop. And knight c4 is played by Magnus, again hitting the queen. And the two queens are traded. Queen takes d1, rook a takes d1. And So captures this knight on c4. After b takes c4, the smoke is pretty much cleared and we're into an endgame. So white's got two double pawns, but has the open d file, and there's now a nice open file for the rook on b1. White also has a dark squared bishop, and it's going to be really hard for black to infiltrate white's position. Even though the pawns are doubled on the c file, this c3 pawn covers a lot of squares, and there's no way for the two knights to jump in. The only potential weakness for white seems to be this a4 pawn. If black could get a knight to b6 somehow, maybe knight c8 and knight b6 may be a possibility. This may be a possibility, but the next move is a bit baffling actually. I don't think this is a good move. So actually played b6, and this straight away limits black's counterplay, I would say. Just because this b6 pawn could now become a really easy target, and there's no knight b6 idea anymore. So I think So made a mistake with that move quite significantly. Instead I think he should have played rook a c8, and this is what the engine suggests as well, Stockfish 10. If white plays rook to b1, hitting the b7 pawn, black can play rook c7, protecting it, so not pushing the b pawn at any point yet. Of course white can gain activity with knight to h4, but black can play g6. After moves like g3, black can play knight to c8 and prepare knight to b6, for instance after f3, rook e6 and knight g2. White can play knight to b6, hitting both pawns on c4 and a4. White can defend the c4 pawn, and after knight takes e4, white can play rook to b5, but now at least black has some sort of counterplay in this game. For instance, maybe knight takes c3 can be played and rook takes a5. And we're into a very dynamic endgame for both sides. But in the actual game, So played b6 as I said, and I think this is a bad move. Carlsen tries to gain activity, plays knight h4, trying to jump into f5 potentially. So plays rook a d8, trying to gain some power over this d file. f3 is played to secure this e4 pawn for white, and g6 is played to secure the f5 square. In this position maybe white can play bishop c1 here to hit the h6 pawn. King h7 could be played, and the computer actually gives white as better here if they play g4. Just because after rook takes d1, rook takes d1, knight c8, king f2, it looks as though black is really passive in this position. It's going to be very hard for black to stop knight d5 ideas, maybe knight to g2 to e3 to d5, as what happened in the game as well. And white just controls this really nice d file. But Carlsen didn't play a bad move, he just played g3 in this position, just holding everything nicely together. Knight h5 is played by black, king f2 by Carlsen to support g3, and knight c6 from So. So Carlsen does actually play bishop c1 here, hitting the pawn. King g7 protects it, and Carlsen places his bishop on a nice square, just bishop to e3. And here So decided it was time to trade rooks, so rook takes d1, rook takes d1, and he plays rook d8, again trying to swap off another pair of rooks. But Carlsen's having none of that. He played rook to b1 now, moving his rook onto the other open file, attacking this b6 pawn. If black here plays a move like rook to d3, I don't think this is very good, just to rook takes b6, and the knight's attacked by this rook. If knight to e7, then just bishop takes c5, and it looks as though black's position is just collapsing. So after rook b1, black has to play rook to b8 to secure this b6 pawn. But now white's idea is really simple. Carlsen is just going to play knight g2, knight to e3, and jump the knight into d5 with a very nice outpost. So Carlsen gets on with this plan. He plays knight g2, So plays knight to f6, king e2 is played, just to manoeuvre this bishop off the e3 square, knight to e8, bishop to f2, So plays knight d6, and Carlsen is just in time with knight to e3 to protect the c4 pawn, and is preparing to play knight to d5. Wesley played knight to e7, And this allows Magnus now to play knight d5, hitting the knight on e7. And after a trade occurs, white can capture with the c pawn, c takes d5, and white is now threatening to take the c5 pawn with the bishop because the b pawn is pinned due to rook takes b8. So for this reason, Wesley now played rook to b7 because this knight is now protecting the rook, so bishop takes c5 can't be played. King d3 is played by Magnus just to stop any knight c4 ideas coming. And in the game here, So actually played f5, but in the analysis after the game, the commentators said this was like a torture chamber for black at the moment. For instance, if So now played f6, Carlsen was going to play c4. Now if g5, Carlsen was going to play bishop to e1. And if king f7, bishop d2, f5 and g4. If black ever plays f4 here, Carlsen was going to play bishop to c3, and after king f6, this is the torture chamber that they're referring to. This is because black is now in Zugzwang. If black makes a move, it's going to significantly weaken their position. So for instance, after rook to b3 from white, there's nowhere for black to go without losing a pawn. If the knight moves, then the bishop can capture on a5 because the b6 pawn is still pinned. And if the king moves, bishop takes e5 is coming. And again, if the rook moves backwards, it's unprotected, so bishop takes a5 can come once again. So this is what the commentators referred to as the torture chamber. In the game though, Wesley didn't play f6, he played a more attacking approach, f5, maybe trying to open the position up a bit. But Carlsen still tries this Zugzwang idea. He plays c4, f takes e4 is played, f takes e4. And again, if black now continued with king f6, white could opt to play g4. And if king e7, let's say bishop to h4, g5 and bishop to e1. After king f6, white can still get this sort of Zugzwang idea with bishop to c3. And again, black's got to make a move, but it will significantly weaken their position, and white's just going to start picking up some pawns. For instance, again, if the king moves, bishop takes e5 is coming. If the rook moves or knight moves, bishop takes a5 is coming. White is also threatening to play rook f1 in this position, and bishop takes e5. So this would be disastrous for black. So after f takes e4, instead of playing king f6, So goes in for the complications. He played rook to f7, possibly the last chance that he has of the game. This allows Carlsen to take on b6. After rook takes f2, rook takes d6. It looks as though white is just significantly better and should win this game. Interestingly though, after So played rook to f3, Carlsen played king to e2. And it was said after the game he was actually really annoyed with this move, just because it allows rook to c3. For instance, he should have probably played king d2, stopping any rook c3 ideas. And after rook takes g3, white can clean up with moves like rook c6. If black gives a few checks, even after rook to a3, white's just going to take these pawns off. And after, black may take a few back, but then these pawns start rolling down the board. And this should be game over for black very soon. But even after king e2, white is still significantly better. But after rook c3, Carlsen played rook e6, rook takes c4 was played, rook takes e5, black plays rook to a4, and Carlsen plays rook to e7. And here So blundered back actually. He played king to f6, and after d6 he actually resigned the game. This is because these pawns are just going to be too quick for black's position. So white's going to play e5 next, followed by d7 and e6, and So resign the game right here. Instead, maybe black should have played king to f8 in this position. White would have continued rook to e6, and after rook b4, white can play king to f3. But white does have some work to do. So for instance, after a4, rook takes g6 and a3, white's got to stop this pawn with rook a6. Black can continue with c4, but if white is really accurate, he can just play king e3. After rook b3, king d4 and c3. King d3 should win the game for white here. For instance, king c2 ideas are coming, and white's going to pick up this c3 pawn. But white would have had to work for that endgame. So I think overall Magnus played a really nice game. The Zugzwang idea was very interesting. Many people are saying that, so probably shouldn't have taken on d1 here. Should have just probably kept the 2 rooks on and made life difficult for whites. But I actually think his worst move was in this position. I don't think he should play b6 at all. I think just play rook a8. It's easy for me to say, obviously, with an engine at my side. This knight b6 idea was probably the only counterplay that black has in this position. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my analysis of this video. Please drop me a like, comment or subscribe to the channel if you want to watch more chess videos in the future, and hopefully I'll bring you some more very soon. Thank you.